Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Mindset Podcast, brought to you by the Opportunities for Youth in Africa, or OYA program. OYA is a joint initiative of the UN Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, and the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. Featuring interviews with inspiring young entrepreneurs from across the African continent, this podcast is about seizing opportunities, overcoming and learning from setbacks, and succeeding in a variety of settings to fulfill your business ambitions. And now, over to our host.
Hello, and welcome to the Entrepreneurial Mindset Podcast, a podcast about young entrepreneurs, for young entrepreneurs wanting to achieve a success. My name is Fifi, and I am your host. This is the second part of our series on how to turn an idea business. And in the front seat for this episode, I have with me award-winning tech entrepreneur Chidi Nwaogu, who is also the co-founder and CEO of Publiseer. Chidi, thanks so much for joining the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
You're quite the global citizen, having lived in many parts of the world, but I'm interested in your hometown, where you were born and raised. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was born in Lagos, Nigeria. I had a very normal childhood. So although I didn't live, most of my life with my father, but I knew that, I knew I had a father that really cared for me. So my father migrated to the United States while I was really young. But, we had so much contact, and he was very instrumental in my life and provided, for the entire family as well. While growing up, I watched my mother, single-handedly, play the both roles of both father and mother. And I think that was one of the, lessons I learned, that, entrepreneurs have to wear many hats, to be able to pull things, and to make things happen. And so she was more like an inspiration for me. She lost her job very early while I was young, but then she didn't stay down. Rather, she just made sure that she did everything possible to make ends meet. And I think I owe most of my successes to my mom, because while she lost the job from the bank because she wasn't a computer literate. She didn't know how to operate the computer. And so she said to herself that her children would never have to go through that kind of problem. They are going to learn how to use the computer very early. And so at the early age of 8, she enrolled us, to computer training colleges to make sure that we learned how to use the computer. And I think, my twin and I were so fascinated about the entire process. We couldn't get enough of computers. And I like to say that from that moment on, I interacted more with computers than I did with human beings. I felt like it was easy to speak to computers, and they always listened, and so I learned how to code. My twin and I, we learned how to code. We had to learn how to code in HTML, CSS, built websites. I think the first website we built, we were about 9 years old. And so we just kept learning. And we always knew that we were never, there's some kind of moments when some people, keep learning how to code, but then hope that maybe they're going to work for Google or for some big, corporation. We always knew that we were going to start something, because each time we spoke about how we're going to use our knowledge, we were always thinking about how we're going to create something out of nothing and, watch it scale. So we've always knew, we always knew, as my twin and I, we always knew we were going to be entrepreneurs. The question was for how long and on what scale. And I think the first entrepreneurial journey we had was after we graduated from high school. We were at the age of 16, and my twin brother discovered a software called Game Maker. So Game Maker helps you to create video games using GML. GML is like an advanced form of basic language that helps you to create video games. And so we learned how to create, we learned how to code in GML. I think it took us about 2 weeks to understand the entire structure and syntax of the entire program. And then we created a video game called Save the Admiral. And we kept, improving on the game and stuff. And we always knew that, it was so exciting, But then, that was the first lesson we learned as entrepreneurs, that you can have an amazing product, but then it might never make money. So, the game was played by thousands of people around the world. However, we didn't make any single money from it. And so we knew early enough that, if you want to create something that's sustainable and, and profitable, you always, apart from it being innovative, you have to create a business model around it.
Yeah.
So we disconnected. We stopped video gaming and went back into web, app development. And so,
can I ask you to go back at this stage? Can I ask you to go back? Because I want to get into the juicy bits of your entrepreneurial journey with your brother and what happened at 16. But let's just go back to the 8-year-old now whose mother said that I don't want my child to ever go through what I went through. I don't want my boys to ever go through what I went through, and taught you and pushed you into computing. So when did you have time to have a childhood?
Well, so my twin and I, we are very introverted, before learning how to create, before we learned the computers, we spent an awful amount of time speaking to ourselves, more like ignoring the entire world, And so it was just more like, it was very easy for us, we always spent hours and hours, in conversation with ourselves. And people always ask that question, like, you guys live in the same house. How do you guys enjoy your company? Even several hours, I think you should get tired of yourselves. But I think we enjoyed, our conversations to a point that if people come, when we're having deep conversations and someone, walks in to try to speak to us, we feel like we are losing some part of our life. Like, can you just leave? Let's continue, with our lives, And so, it was very
antisocial.
Exactly. I think we're very antisocial, So it was very easy for us to embrace computers because it was like more of an extension to the current life we lived, and when we code, we just found, I don't know, but it was just like something, like it was more like love at first sight. We understood that this is something we wanted to do for the rest of our lives. And I think we had a normal childhood. I don't think anybody can tell me what a normal childhood looks like. I loved my childhood, and I really I believe is what made me, who I am today. I learned very early that, whatever you want to do, you have to work hard for it. And so, yeah, I enjoyed my childhood so much. Yeah. I wish I could go back, actually.
Don't we all? But you mentioned something so interesting. You said that, when you started coding from a really young age, you and your brother, it's Chika, right?
Yeah, Chika, yeah.
Yeah, you and your brother Chika, shout out to Chika. But you knew that you would eventually start something on your own. You knew. And I think that's really important because most people, when you talk with entrepreneurs, it's as though you guys have a form of calling. But at the same time, there is of teaching and skills development that needs to come with that entrepreneurial edge. So where did you learn business? Who taught you business?
Well, nobody really taught us business. I think we learned business by failing. We built, we created a social network. I think we learned most of the business that we know today from our first startup company. That was LAGbook. I think where we got into the University of Lagos and still started a social network called LAGbook. It actually is a brand acronym for Ladies and Gentlemen Book. So it started as a social network for students of our university. That's the University of Lagos. And this was we were about 16, 17. I think we started the company at the age of 19 while we were at the university. And we had over 30,000 students, sign up to the platform. It got very huge coverage, but then we were not still making money. And I think that was when we realized that, we need to find some sort of way to make money from this. So we introduced ads, self-serve ads on our platform, and then we kept making money from it. I think when we made the most money was the time that BlackBerry wanted to come into Africa and have a presence in Africa. And so I received a phone call late in the night, and the phone call was from a guy called Tunji Ademili, and then he said, I am the career marketing manager of BlackBerry, and I would love to run advertisements on your platform. I actually thought it was scam, because I was like, why would BlackBerry reach out to me? I think it's the other way around. Often you reach out to multinational companies and not and not them reaching out to you. Yeah. So I cut off the call and just ignored the call. I was like, that's scam. But then, he reached out again via email and said, I was the one who called you and this is what I want. And we had a roundtable conversation with them, and they spent a lot of money on putting their ads on our platform. And I think that was when we knew the worth of our platform. And then we began to aggressively market our platform, to get more businesses to advertise on our platform. I think that's where we learned most of the businesses, the business development, and the business model creation. I think it was from our time creating LAGbook and eventually selling the company into a Canadian company. Yeah.
So LAGbook was the company that you created following the first company that you started out with your brother at 16.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And then you said that with that company, there was a lot of lessons in terms of the fact that you guys were not making money. So let's go back to that point and what happened in that time between you being frustrated with the fact that you're not making money and you eventually starting LAGbook. What happened in that period?
Yeah, I think we had to accept the fact that we were in interest. The market was interesting, but it wasn't ready yet. So we did some market research as kids, but we didn't really know it's called market research. We just tried to understand what was happening. And so we asked a couple of friends, if they would want to buy our game, but then they said no, but they played the game like 24/7. We kept wondering, why would you play a game so long and you don't want to buy it? And then we realized that most of the games that Nigerians play at that time were all pirated. They were not directly from the game developers. People, created some really cheap CDs and then made the games available to them at very little to nothing, little to nothing. And so we realized that Nigerians were not ready at the moment to pay so much to play games. I think they felt at that moment that games were to be played for free. And so we just realized that the market is interesting. People love what we do, but we are not going to make any money if we keep staying in this industry. And so we had to move and start another company, which was LAGbook.
And then are these the two companies that you eventually ended up selling?
Yeah, so the game development company was shut down. It wasn't sold. LAGbook was sold to a Canadian tech company called GovPro Limited. This was during the last final year of the university. And after our final year at school, when we graduated, we had to start another company. And the new company was my twin brother's idea. And he said to me, I want us to create something unconventional. I want us to create something, more like a technology tool that would help Christians to pray easily. It sounded interesting. However, it was a little bit not something we were used to, but we just decided to do it. And I think that was the fastest growing startup we ever had. We had over 200,000 users within 4 months, and it got acquired, after 4 months, So it got acquired by an American nonprofit organization called Tendo's Charity. And that was the second acquisition. And that was when we decided to take a break from tech entrepreneurship. And I went into writing, and Michael went into music. And then we discovered the challenges in the creative industry. And then we regrouped to create a Publiseer that works with African creatives. Yeah.
So you mentioned the point where you rightly said that you got approached by a major player at the time, BlackBerry. Lots of lessons to be learned from BlackBerry, but that's a conversation for another day. You got approached by a BlackBerry as opposed to you approaching them for advertising. What do you think when you look back at your business? What do you think made you stand out such that this global player at the time knocked on your door?
Well, I think what really made that happen was because we had an affiliation with Etisalat. So what we did, we were really young. I think we're like about 20. And so my twin and I, we said to ourselves that we wanted to create a new type of social networking that pays people for actually sharing photos and stuff. So, we created a platform that made that when people shared photos, they got certain, airtime, that could be transferred to their phones. And so people, we found a lot of people, sharing photos, charting and, updating their status so that they can get airtime, to top up their phones. And I think that was one of the, that affiliation with the Etisalat, that was what brought, I think that was what made BlackBerry, discover us, and they said to themselves, if Etisalat can work with these guys, then we can work with with these guys. However, they didn't understand that our partnership with Etisalat at the moment wasn't monetary. Etisalat was just providing us with airtimes to give to our customers, our users, in exchange for advertising them on our platform for free. So I think they felt that Etisalat was paying us directly to advertise, and so maybe that was some sort of recommendation, and so they just said, okay, if Etisalat can actually pay these guys to actually advertise on our platform, then we can also pay them as well. I think that's what happened. I don't know for sure, but that's what I feel. I feel that's what happened here.
A mix of luck, maybe a mix of destiny, but clearly there was something that you were doing right. You were delivering with your existing partner that made your business easy to recommend. So how would you describe your work ethic, and what kind of work ethic do you think is important, particularly as a young entrepreneur?
Well, I think for me, my work ethic, I have two values I live by. And the first one is that I never say I tried, so I have an uncle who told me once that I tried is not English, and I still don't understand what he meant. But I think he's trying to say that you should never use it, in your vocabulary. You should never tell someone I tried. You should keep trying until you get it done and you get it right. And so that's one of the ethics I live by, my work ethics. I make sure that I keep trying hard. I keep working at something. As long as I know this is what I want, I keep going, at it until I get it done or I get it right. And I think that's one of the things that I work, that I live by. And the other one I do is that I do not dwell on any achievement. Sometimes, you get some people that get carried away with what they've achieved, and they feel like, okay, I think I'm where I'm supposed to be. But I'm always constantly telling myself what's next. So when I achieve something great, I tell myself immediately what's next. I always tell my teammates, once we achieve a milestone, celebrate instantaneously, but then forget about it instantly and ask yourself what's next. I think that's what helps us to stay consistent and relevant, in the ecosystem. And I think those are the two things that I live by that really, helps me to stay relevant in the work that I do, rather than, just fizzling out or becoming obsolete in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have achieved quite a lot, certainly for a young age. Your list of accolades, I mean, I'll run out of time at this stage trying to list them all, but what does stand out and what pops up in my memory is the fact that, you're the ambassador, or one of the ambassadors of One Young World. You are also an ambassador of the Acumen Foundation, affiliate of Alibaba. How, as a young person, how did you stay grounded within these achievements? Because sometimes when you are doing great, it's very easy to get ahead of yourself or to get a big head about what you've been able to achieve. So how did you manage to strike that balance?
Well, so for me, this is how I look at life. When you're a circle and you surround yourself with smaller circles, you actually look big. But then when you surround yourself with much bigger circles, then you realize that you're small. So I understand that I'm like a circle, but then I surround myself with people that have achieved more, or people that I look up to, I'm constantly reminded that there's much to achieve, So this doesn't mean that I forget about the friends I had, that haven't achieved so much, but I always stay in touch with my original circle to motivate them or inspire them. But then I always make sure that I reach out to people who have done so much, who has done so well for themselves. And I constantly just, speak to them and know, what motivates them and how they, they keep doing what they do. So I'm constantly reminded that I'm nobody, and that, I can actually look like somebody to somebody, but then to other people, I'm actually not, nowhere. So I'm constantly reminded that I'm actually at the starting point, and there's a long way to cover, a long journey to go. And, it doesn't mean that, you've achieved, you're an Acumen fellow or you're an Alibaba founder fellow. There's so much, fellowships that are way higher than Acumen fellowship that I can actually be part of in the future. So I constantly work myself, every day to make sure that I get to that higher, grounds, that higher floor, that higher level. So I'm always constantly reminding myself there's still more work to be done, and there's still more grounds to cover.
So the lesson there, if you reach a stage where you are a big fish in a small pond, get out the pond and get into the sea, and that will help you remain grounded. Chidi, I want to go back to the business though, because one thing that we haven't touched on is how you could afford to start your businesses. Where did you get the money from to get going?
That's a very interesting question, really. I was actually wondering when you're going to ask me that. So, yeah. So I think what we did was more like sacrifice, and so I'll explain what that means. So my twin and I, when we got into the University of Lagos, we always got like monthly allowance, from our parents, like stipend from our parents, and we understood that we had to either enjoy this money right now, or we just, do some delayed gratification and, just invest the money into this startup company that we are building and then, have to enjoy in the future. And so we took a huge chunk of the money every month. I think we took about 80, to 90% every month into the startup and managed the remaining 10 to 20%. We just always understood that we're building something bigger than us. And eventually someday we are going to actually enjoy the fruits of this labor. So we just kept investing our stipend. I think our parents never knew. I think if my mom or my father ever knows, it's from this very recording, so yeah, they never knew what was going on. And, we just kept, we just kept doing it. Sometimes we're supposed to eat 4 times a day, but then we can reduce it to like once or twice, understanding that the idea is, it's more like delayed gratification. Someday we're going to eat 1 million times a day if you want to, but the idea is to just keep focused on the bigger vision, on the bigger picture. And so yeah, we just kept using the little money that we got from our parents, and the $100 and stuff. Just kept using it to keep into the business monthly and to just make sure that the business stays alive. Yeah.
Because quite often for some people, it's not about sacrifice. A lot of young people who are starting businesses will talk about the lack of access to resources to help them. Why didn't you just go knock on the door of a bank or a financier and, be in a position whereby you and your brother could eat 4 meals a day instead of the one that you sometimes did refer to?
So I think I learned a lot from my mom, and there's something my mom never does. She never borrows, I don't know why, but she never did it. And she always told us that as human beings, we should learn to live, by, on our means and our own terms. We shouldn't try to borrow, that borrowing is, to my mom, she frowns, at borrowing. She always felt that you should always live, on your means. And so we kind of had that mentality while growing up that no matter where we are, no matter what we have just enough that we need. And that if we don't have it right now, then we don't need it. And we always try to think out of the box to make use of whatever little that we have. So I think that's where we got that mentality. Everybody in my family thinks that way. I don't think there's anybody in my family that I've ever known that has ever borrowed money from someone, or from a bank or from any, like we always stay, grounded to what we have. And we always make sure that we use the most out of it. And so that's why we didn't, do that, because my mom always told us, never borrow, never, when, someone gives you a loan, they will never leave you alone, So we always had that back, at the back of our mind that we want people to leave us alone, so we shouldn't borrow. And so we just kept doing what we could do with the little that we had. And I think one of the good things that we had as tech entrepreneurs was that we were software developers. So that means we could create the product without having to hire any external software developer. And so that was something that really helped us as founders. And also we were excellent at creating buzz around our products. So we were like excellent digital marketers. I don't know how that came about, but we just knew how to create buzz. We knew how to create that desired attention, around the product. When we got to school, we were freshmen in school, but we made everybody in school know about LAGbook without having to spend a single dime. And so I think it's something that comes natural to us. And I think it was a gift, put in us because, somehow, someone higher than us knew that we're going to need it, So I think that's what helped us, down the line. We never had to we never saw the need to borrow, from anybody. We just kept doing what we did with what we had, and eventually everything worked out fine. Yeah.
It's such a contrast that you've got these two individuals who are antisocial. I'm going to put it frankly, antisocial people who like their space, but are excellent at reaching out and marketing and getting people to know a lot more about their products. It's usually not that way around, but nonetheless, the two internet companies that you and your brother ended up selling, was that always the plan, to start a company and then sell it off?
No, it wasn't the initial plan. The initial plan was to grow with it. But then I think there's something we had as founders. We wanted what was good for the company. And so we got to a point, when we felt we had done everything we could do for LAGbook. And we felt that if it was to grow, continuously grow and, stay sustainable, we need to sell it to somebody or to a bigger corporation that had more resources to push it forward. And so that was when we decided to sell. And I think it's just more like a mother's instinct when the mother realized that she doesn't have enough money to take her kids to school. But then she decides to put the kids up for adoption because she understands that once they get adopted, they will live a better life. And so that was what happened to us. We wanted the best for LAGbook. We knew that if we kept, running the startup based on the more like bootstrapping, we might not be able to take it to where we want to take it to. And so we just said to ourselves, why don't we look for someone who's bigger, someone who has more resources to pull, and to push, this startup, to where we want it to go to. And so, yeah, that's why we sold. And the same thing happened to Prayer House as well. We also knew that if it got, sold, if it got acquired by 10 those, that they had more resources than we did, and they're going to do, they're going to do more, with Prayer House than we would ever possibly do. And so, yeah, we sold it. So we always sell based on, do we feel that this is going to create a sustainable and exponential growth for what we have built? And so, yeah, and that's why we sell. Yeah.
And where are those businesses now?
So for LAGbook, we learned a very big lesson. And the big lesson we learned for LAGbook was that some people don't often do what they say. And because when we got approached by the Canadian company to get acquired, we sold to them, in good faith, believing that they are going to keep the entire social network intact and they're going to help us to keep building the brand that we've started building. But then eventually they took the social network piece by piece, they took it, piece by piece, changed the entire name of the social network and started doing things, differently. But I think it's, the new, brand that they created out of LAGbook, I don't think the users was buying it. And so eventually it went so high, but then it crashed and they had to shut down within about a year or two. And so, yeah. But then we learned a very big lesson that when we sell into a bigger corporation, that we needed to sign some sort of acquisition agreement, And so we did that with the other company. And so everything, with the other company was stayed intact and just the same way that we've built it, and they just kept growing it exponentially. And so, yeah, that was what we learned.
And did you sell completely, or did you still retain an equity stake in these businesses?
We sold completely, 100%, yeah. Both businesses, yeah.
How much did you get for them, and what did you do with the money?
So for LAGbook, we got about over $10,000. And what we did with the money, I think we used a big part of that to start the next company. And the next company got acquired for about $40,000 within 4 months. So I think it was a good investment, eventually, yeah.
I mean, you're talking big sums, especially when you do the conversions into currencies in Africa. And I wonder at what point you and your brother had legal help to sign these contracts that must complicated given the amounts of money that we're talking about. Did you, consult legally, and do you think that part of administration in terms of having the right financial advisor or having the right lawyer on board to draft your contracts is important for a young entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think it's important to have some sort of legal counsel, as a young entrepreneur. But my twin and I, we didn't have at that moment, and I think the reason why we didn't have at the moment was we felt we could do it. And I remember when we had an agreement with some big executive at MTN Communications, and he made a statement. He said, "You guys are not tech entrepreneurs. You guys are businessmen, because this contract looks so, so professional. Like, where did you get the template to build it?" And we said we built it from scratch. And I think the reason why was that we learned a lot from lessons. We kept learning. We learned the hard way. And because there was no sort of education, for entrepreneurs back then, in 2012, in 2009, there was very few tech entrepreneurs. And so there was literally no support for tech entrepreneurship back then. So we had to learn the hard way. We had to do things by ourselves. But right now, I would advise any young entrepreneur to have some sort of legal counsel, because there are so many people, out there that's trying as much as possible to, to reap from your hard labor. And when you're too young and naive, and they really sense that desperation to get the, in you, they're definitely going to, like, I don't know how I'm going to put it, but they're going to more like try to use you to I've seen so many entrepreneurs sign deals that they eventually ended up regretting, because they just wanted the money, they wanted the investment, they wanted the funding. Eventually they realized that they actually signed, way too much for very little. And so if they had some sort of legal counsel, I'm sure they wouldn't have made that kind of mistake. Yeah, so I would advise any young entrepreneur to have some sort of legal counsel at some point in their career.
Yeah, and also on the other side of that, so quite a number of entrepreneurs who, without the legal counsel, have ended up losing out on deals as a result of not doing the clever legal footwork. But let's fast forward. So we're at this point now, this juncture, when you and your brother decide to take a bit of a break from business. He goes and makes music, and then you go into writing. But my question is, how do software developers and these tech wizards and these computer geniuses venture into the arts? How did that come about?
It's a really important, a very valid question. But I'd like to say that my twin and I are somewhat like permit me to use the word polymath. So there's some things I always told my twin brother. I said, we have very contrasting qualities. People that love spending so much time alone. How come we're good at digital marketing? And how do we end up being so good in creative? So I'm going to say this here. I don't think I've said this in any interview in the past. My twin and I, we used to be part of a music group called Twin Harmony sometime in 2007. So we were a music duo like P Square. Actually, we used to look up.
No way.
Yeah.
How old were you?
We were about 17. Yeah, right. 17.
Okay.
But we've always, written music since we were 13, so it's crazy that we were learning how to create, we're learning to code and simultaneously writing music at the same time. But I think that happens to a lot of people, but we just don't know it. And so I think we also, as Twin Harmony, we recorded a studio album, a full studio album of 14 tracks, but it never saw the light of the day, So I just don't know. I think that the industry was so cruel and it was just so difficult, and so just had to give up.
Not that it was bad. No,
it wasn't. It was actually good. We actually sold the CDs to our family members and friends. Yeah, so.
Who loved the music. They bought it because they loved the music, not because they loved you.
Who knows? We'll never know, right?
Sure.
So I think my twin brother wanted to rekindle the spark of Twin Harmony, so he went back into music. And at that moment, I found writing, fiction writing or creative writing very interesting. And so I went into creative writing. I wrote about 4 novels, and he recorded about 2 studio albums. And so we wanted to make money from it, but then my twin, he made a lot of money from his music, but then he lost it, via mail fraud. Somebody intercepted the check that he received from TuneCore, and then they took his money. And that was when we understood that the aggregators, the current aggregators, they were not tailored for us, because they didn't have a kind of royalty payment system that worked for African creatives. They insisted on giving the money via PayPal. And in Nigeria, Ghana, most, the country where we come from, we don't have access to PayPal. So you had to go for check payments. But check payments, the check got intercepted, using mail fraud, via mail fraud. Someone used the fake ID, took his money. And so my twins, the money was about $5,000. It was a lot of money. Yeah. So he said to me, let us create a platform focused on African creative that was created for African creatives in mind. And so we created Publiseer. And Publiseer was just a way for us to solve a problem that we've experienced firsthand. So it was more like us fusing 2 parts, of our lives. Our experience in the creative industry, for 2 years, and then our experience in tech entrepreneurship for about 8 years. We're fusing it together to create a bigger company, a digital media company. And I think that was why Publisher scaled very quickly, because we understood the problem very well, because we experienced the problem ourselves. And we had this experience, in building and scaling business, a tech business. And so we just fused it together, and everything just, happened naturally. Yeah.
Okay, so now you're sitting with around 7,000 plus creatives on your platform. According to your website, you are making revenues of around $280,000 US. Correct me there. Are you profitable this time around? Is this a business that you are happy to say we are finally making good profits?
Yeah, we actually became profitable 8 months after inception. So we've always, I think the reason why we got profitable very quickly was because when we started the company, from the very first day, we wanted to make profits. So it was in our mind that though we are creating, we're creating lasting impact, we needed to create profit to be able to sustain the impact that we want to create. And so that was what was on our mind, from day one, start making money and make sure that the money is big enough to sustain the business for, indefinitely. And so, we became profitable 8 months after launch.
You mentioned a very important lesson, I think, as well. The reason why Publiseer was started, and it was to address a problem in the market and to provide a solution. I mean, do you think that this needs to be the foundation of any business or any young entrepreneurial venture? You need to know what problem you're solving, and you need to make sure that you come with the right solution.
I think that answer is a no-brainer, obviously. Every entrepreneur understands that, to become successful at what you do, then you must be solving a pressing problem. And so, you shouldn't be solving a problem that only you understand, that you invented. So many entrepreneurs invent problems in their head. So the problems, they are the only ones seeing it, but other people don't see it, So you must be solving a prevalent problem, a problem that is dominant, that a lot of people, at least a substantial amount of people, are experiencing. And your solution must adequately solve this problem. So I see so many entrepreneurs that understand the concept of the problem they're solving. However, their solution doesn't really connect to the problem. It doesn't really solve the problem. If it solves the problem, maybe partially, but not like completely. But I'm not saying you should solve the problem completely, but solve it adequately, and maybe eventually with time you can solve it completely. But so it's very important, for you to understand the problem you're solving complete, very, in its entirety, and then create a solution. And the solution, you must be creating a solution not based on what you think is the solution, but what your customers believe is the solution. You should get the basic idea of what the solution should look like. For example, when Carl Benz asked people, "What do you want?" They said they want a faster horse. He understood that what they needed was something faster than a horse, but he didn't create a faster horse. He created a vehicle that was faster than a horse. So you know, as an entrepreneur, it's your job to create, to determine the final, version of your solution. But it must be based on on the inference you've drawn from what your customers, want, And so, yeah, if you don't solve a problem, adequately, I don't think you're in for business. And it's very easy for people to feel that way. And it's very important that as an entrepreneur, you fall in love with the problem that you're solving and not the solution that you're building. Because if you're in love with the solution you're building, often the first solution is not always the right solution or the adequate solution. Things always, you might either have to iterate, you might either have to pivot, you definitely have to build upon your value proposition. And if you are in love with the solution you're building, then you would be very, rigid to, or you have friction to feedback. You don't want to take feedback because you're already in love with what you have. It's just like when you tell the mother that her kid is ugly. Obviously she'll be so pissed because, she's in love with the child. So, you shouldn't be in love with the solution that you're building. You should be in love with the problem that you're solving. So that gives you that flexibility to improve or to receive feedback, especially negative feedback, and build upon it. So, yeah, I think every entrepreneur has to understand the problem clearly and work hard to make sure that their solution solves that problem adequately.
Yeah, and I think telling a mother that her baby is ugly is very rude. But Chidi, so let's talk a little bit more about Publiseer and your clientele. So how impactful have you been with the number of creatives that are on your platform in continually addressing the problems for some of Africa's creatives?
So for us, I think I don't know if I got the question right. Can you repeat it? So I'm sure I'm answering the question.
I'm wondering how you measure success of what it is you're doing. And I wonder if it's as a result of impact. Do you measure it by impact? And if we look at the creatives on your platform, what has Publiseer enabled them to do? What has been the impact for the creatives on your platform?
So we measure Publiseer's success based on impact and not profit, obviously, because we are a for-profit social venture, and that means that we take our social impact very important. And the most metric that we measure as a company is what we call the North Star metric. So our North Star metric is the number of creators on our platform that are earning above $50 per month, for every 30 days. So $50 is usually like the minimum wage for many African countries. And so we said to ourselves, if we can make every creative on our platform earn at least $50 every 30 days from the creative content, then we believe that we've been able to achieve what we want to do as a business, because our vision is to help at least 2 million African creatives by the year 2030 to earn above the minimum wage and live above poverty line strictly from the sales of their creative works with us. And so that's the metric that we measure mostly. But then we have other minor or vanity metrics that we also measure as a company. But for our creatives, what we really do that stand out to them or makes the work that we do very important to them is that we are in it with them for the long run. So usually most aggregators would request money from the creators before they can distribute their content or do whatever or offer any services to them. But at Publiseer, we kind of bet on them. So we do everything we do is at no charge. So we fine tune so when we receive their content from them, we fine tune the content to a standard that's acceptable in the industry, so that way that they can compete on a global scale. We also protect their work from intellectual property theft and illegal distribution. This helps them to be just truly say that they own their content. And then we have about 413 partner stores. And so this helps them to easily get discovered. So all these things that we do, we do it at no charge. And then we take 25% of whatever we generate for them. So they understand that we only make money when they make money. And I think that gives them that comfort, knowing that, Publiseer is on the journey with them. As they grow, we grow. And I think that's one of the value that proposition that we have, we have shown them over the years. Some of them actually thought that at some point we are going to start demanding money from them, but then we stay true to the mission of having to, because our main focus is creatives at the bottom of the pyramid. First-time creatives that come from low-income communities, creatives that come from disadvantaged communities, those that live under $1 a day. And so these kinds of creatives, they are our primary target, although we've worked with more established creatives, but these are our primary targets. And we understand that, we can't charge these people because they can't afford it. And so we just make sure that we bet on them. We always find the best of them and we bet on them and give them give them the environment that will help them to grow. And so far, it's amazing to see the amount of creatives that have become full-time creatives, just because they discovered Publiseer. And, some of them have had the privilege to quit whatever job that they were doing and focus full-time on the creating process. And that's something that we are very proud of.
And again, you have managed relationships with important global players in the tech and the streaming business, the players for now. It's Amazon, I see. You've also got a partnership or a relationship. Your creatives are also on the iTunes platform, as well as Spotify. Again, big names. How did this come to be?
So when we started, we had some direct partnerships with some of these platforms. We had some direct partnership with Google Play, and I think that was due to a connection that we received from one of the Google employees, who put in a good word for us and got us to have that partnership. But then when we started, we had some more like intermediary partnership with Amazon. So this means that we didn't have a direct partnership with Amazon. We had a partnership with a bigger player who had a direct partnership with Amazon. And it still made sense because this bigger player, our creatives do not have access to them because they only work with, with retailers like Publiseer. And so we're like a plug, between these independent creatives to these much bigger, players, and every day we're always working towards having more direct partnerships with the stores that we have. We have about 413 partner stores, and we have direct partnership with about 200 of them, and then indirect partnerships with about with the other half. And the aim is that as we keep growing the startup company, and as we keep increasing in our catalog, then we'll be able to have enough grounds to be able to have that direct partnership with all 400 partners here.
So the creative industry it's an interesting one because it is one that is getting or has received a lot of attention, particularly the past 15 months as we've dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic. And I believe one of the reasons it is receiving attention is because it's authentic and it's not easily automated. Right? As we do witness what the pandemic has done in replacing a lot of jobs that can be automated, the creative industry kind of stands out in the sense of being a potential sector for the future that could provide a lot of opportunities for young people, even more than presently is the case. So for African creatives that are listening in on this podcast, Chidi, what would you tell them about the kind of content that the world does want to listen to read, to watch from the continent? How would you tell them to perhaps, or advise them to perhaps tailor their content to the out there from the rest of the world about Africa?
Well, for us as a company, what we are trying to do is to change the African narrative, and we are always looking out for content that paints Africa in the perfect light, in the right sense, in the right light. So I think one of the reasons why we focus on African themed content and content that actually speaks about Africa and shows the true nature and the beauty of Africa is because there's a single story about Africa, in other parts of the world. And I got to experience this single story when I travel a lot. There's so very little other parts of the world know about Africa, but the more prevalent knowledge they have about Africa is that of poverty, is that of corruption, and there's really no beauty in the image that they have of Africa. And so as a company, we're trying to change that narrative. We're trying to change that story. We're trying to make other parts of the world understand that Africa it's a really beautiful continent. There's so many creative minds. There's so many beautiful things happening in Africa. We have some of the best talents, and so we always look out for content that really paints Africa in the right light. Like, for example, when we look, we look out for music. We look out for music that, that talks about Africa, like that promotes Africa in general, like Afro pop, Afro beat. This doesn't mean that we don't accept R&B and hip hop, but we put more emphasis on African themed content that really shows that that are really originated from Africa. And so when someone has a short movie that they want to distribute via our platform, we always try to make it really African centric. That these movie or this short film or this music or this book talks about Africa in such a way that the other parts of the world will understand what it means to be Africa, what it means to be an African, and what it means to live in Africa. So it's just more like a journey for them. While they are where they are able to journey into Africa virtually. In within the pages of a book or within the comfort of a headset. That's the kind of content we're looking for. And I saw for any creative that want to really get distributed by Publiseer, if they can actually do this, in whatever content that they have, then the chance of us distributing their content is really like 100%. Yeah.
So Publiseer has been operational for, is it 4 years now? You started in 2017. I believe that this is perhaps one of the most unprecedented times for your business. I don't know if you've ever dealt with a crisis to the same scale as the COVID-19 pandemic. What has it meant for your business? What has this very difficult time for the world also taught you?
So I think we're one of the few businesses that the COVID-19 really promoted our sales. So we experienced a revenue spike during the pandemic. And I think one of the reasons why we experienced that was that people found comfort in reading books, listening to music. So people spent so much extra time, doing these things, watching movies and stuff. And so eventually we kept making money because people weren't going out living the regular life. People had to find some way to keep themselves busy. And I think entertainment was some way that they used, to comfort themselves, in the midst of the crisis. So we had a lot of, I think we experienced about 30 to 40% increase in revenue. But then we as we also had a downtime, in some parts of our business. One of the parts we had was that we discovered that new music was not being submitted. And we experienced over 80% downtime in the amount of music being submitted. And we tried to understand, the reason why this happened. And also reached out to a couple of musicians on our platform to understand why. And that was when they made us to understand that they could not go to the studio anymore to record their music. And so they can do it indoor because it's not going to have so much quality. They can do it on their own because, it's going to lack quality. And so they, have to go to the studio and, it was a lockdown. So there was no studio. And, so it was not just possible for them anymore. And so we had to start looking for means in which we can help them to record quality music while, in their house, while they can, how to be able to collaborate with their producers from far away, with the comfort of their computer. So we discovered an app called Soundation. And so we reached out to Soundation to find out if there was ways in which they can help our creatives to understand how the platform works and stuff. And I think that really helped us. It increased the amount of music being submitted on our platform, but it didn't get back to the exact number it used to be, when everything was normal. But right now, everything is getting back to the way it used to be. Everybody's now living the life that they used to live. But that was one of the things that we experienced, as a startup company. But so far, the revenue did not dwindle. And I think the reason why was that we did not venture into print publishing. We did not venture into physical CD distribution. We stayed true to the digital media space, which was e-publishing, digital music, video on demand. And so I think that was one of the reasons why we were not affected. Rather, it's our sales increased because you could purchase whatever we were selling, over the internet. Yeah.
So right now, the bulk of your journey and your success has been very organic. If you just allow me to explain, so you started your business with your brother as a result of making sacrifices. So not asking for handouts outside, making the sacrifices to get the funds to get going. As a result of your mother's loss in her career and her push of you into computing and software development, you were able to out quite significant costs in the digital space by doing everything in-house. And so your entrepreneurial journey has been a lot about yourself, what you've brought to the table, the sacrifices you've made, and the luck that you have had on the way. But right now, there is a call and a recognition from a lot of players that a lot more needs to be done to develop entrepreneurs and grow a lot more young entrepreneurs. We've got governments all over the continent who have unveiled various programs in order to do so. We've got development finance institutions like the one that is hosting this podcast, the UNIDO and FOA via the OYA program that are also trying to play their part. In your view, how should these interventions by external players to try and give a lot more young entrepreneurs opportunities for success be implemented?
Well, I think a lot of this have to do with government. For example, the Nigerian government. I always say this, but Nigeria is not the best place to start a business, as a young entrepreneur, because there's so many policies that are against you as an entrepreneur, so much taxes, so much requirements, for an entrepreneur. To get into the fintech space, you have to spend several thousands of dollars to start it. And what happens to the young entrepreneur, by his bedside, trying to create the next big thing in the fintech? How does he do it? So the government always create policies that are always against the young and the ordinary person. And they just, the policies only work for the elites and those that have the money to be able to invest, and so it's very difficult for a young person to dream in an ecosystem or an environment that does not support their growth. For everything you're trying to do, the government is doing something else that's taking you 2 steps backwards. I have a lot of friends that, started the fintech space and then eventually had to leave it because there was very, so much tough policies that just didn't give them the opportunity to show what they're capable of doing. And this happens a lot. And sometimes, I always say that, entrepreneurs don't really need funding. They don't really need money. What they need is that relevant connection, because at the end of the day, the money is going to be used to get that connection. If, during incubation programs, after incubating a startup company or accelerating a startup company, you can point them in the right places and give them the right partnerships that they need. They are going to really scale very quickly, but these days, incubation programs, the acceleration programs that we have do not really point people in the right direction. It's more like theoretical, and then when they go to the real world, which is the practical, they are always hit down, on their knees, so it's something that I've been an entrepreneur, in the incubation stage, and I understood how the difficulties that in getting relevant connection, in being able to do certain things, because there is no opportunity whatsoever. People they claim that they are doing something about it, but they're really not really scratching the surface. They're scratching the surface. So, for example, the Tony Elumelu program that gives startup founders, $5,000. The question I always ask is, what do they do? After giving them the money, do they, in some sort of way, make sure that they give them the relevant connection within the industry to utilize that money properly? Because some of them, they throw this money at the wrong things. For example, they are trying to achieve something, but then somebody, promises them that if they give them maybe a chunk of the money, like $1,000 or $2,000 out of the $5,000, they're going to help them to achieve certain things. And then they give them the money and the people disappear. They've lost the money. And that was because they were not given the right platform to know who's right and who's wrong for them. So they just jump at any opportunity that looks very attractive. But if the foundation can, apart from giving them the money, help them to figure out how to spend the money properly, give them the right partners, if they want to do something legal, help them to connect them with the right legal partners. If they want to do something in marketing, help them to connect them to the right, marketing firm. Just that way they will spend the money properly and they'll spend the money on the right things, rather than having to just, spend the money on the wrong people that promises them everything, but then, fulfills nothing. So I think that, the most, thing that any organization or any government can do for young entrepreneurs is to give them is to connect them to the relevant stakeholders within their industry. Because I believe that, with that connection, they can achieve everything that they plan to do. Because, money is, anybody can give you money. I can wake up in the morning and give, $5,000 to about 10 people. But then, that does not assure success, because at the end of the day, some of them might spend the money wrongly. Some of them might not spend the money in the right way because I did not monitor them or help them to achieve it. It's just like when you have a teacher. There's a reason why there's a teacher in the classroom. Obviously, the teacher could just give them lesson notes and leave. But the teacher is there to make sure that they understand the lesson note properly. They, do the assignments. They do everything that is required for them to clearly understand whatever it is that's being taught, and to actually thrive in their education. And so that's the same thing that I believe that the organizations should do. You just don't hand out opportunities, hand out money, or hand out funding, or hand out anything, or hand out lessons. You are at the same time, you should try as much as possible to give them that relevant connection that they need. You can get them a mentor that stays with them for at least a year or two, just to monitor, and help them to just scale their business. After the program, you shouldn't just leave them, hanging, because some of them did not really understand much from the program. They understand most, when they go out to the real world. That's when they really learn. And so that's the moment that, they need that help than in the incubation program or in the acceleration program. So I think that's what most organizations or government should do if they really want to help the next generation of entrepreneurs here.
I hear you. So the programs are a great first step, but they need to be coupled with access to markets and access to networks, maybe even further financial support along the way, but also a support regarding the know-how and the financial education, or the education behind the entrepreneurship. I get you 100%. Lastly, what is your advice to young entrepreneurs listening to you, who are familiar with your story, who have become a lot more familiar with your story after this podcast, who want to be like you or attain the level of success that you have? What's your advice to them about entrepreneurship?
Well, my advice is very simple. There's no such thing as overnight success. Some people see certain things in the media, people raising funds, people winning awards and stuff, and just feel like it's an overnight success. So I think you shouldn't listen to the media, or don't get fooled by the media, believing that somebody just overnight became a celebrity or became whatever they are. There's so much backstory behind, there's so much pain, there's so much challenges, that was not recorded. For example, for myself, I always tell people, people think I'm a success, but I always tell them that I see myself more as a failure, because I believe I fail more than I succeed. The only difference between me and someone who failed, who is actually recorded as a failure, is because I keep trying, I keep doing as much as possible until I get it done. But that does not mean I get it done during my first attempt. Sometimes I have to do something 4 or 5 times before I get it done or I get it right. So I just advise them to stay true to their own story and their own journey, trust the process, and understand that success is more like, it's a combination of accumulated, little things that you do every day. You wake up in the morning, you do what is required of you, and then you go to bed, and you wake up the next day and you do, you keep working. That's what success is. So success is not doing something great, but it's doing several good things consistently, which eventually becomes great. It's just more like when they say the little drops of ocean, little drops of water makes a big ocean. So that's how success as an entrepreneur is. You keep doing what's required of you. Don't be so intimidated by what you see other people do. they've had so much time to practice. They've had so much time, to learn. You're starting out, understand that, every expert wants a learner. So you should understand that you have your own journey ahead of you and just stay true to it. And eventually you're going to make it. It's just a matter of time.
So everyone must know who is looking at that bookshelf behind you full of all the awards and the certificates that wasn't received and achieved overnight.
No, not at all.
Right, Chidi, thanks so much for your inspirational message and really walking us through your journey as an entrepreneur. And we look forward to the what's next element in your journey. And that is how we wrap up this episode of the Entrepreneurial Mindset that was about how to turn an idea into a business. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you will listen in on the next podcast. But from myself, Fifi Peters, we'll leave it there for now.
This has been the OYA Entrepreneurial Mindset Podcast. Tune in to stay up to date on each new episode for more inspiring stories. Share your entrepreneurial journey with us using the hashtag #WeNeedOYA. A link to our website and social media is available in the description of the episode.